Looking at me.
Yep, you're on now.
All right. Good afternoon. Is that what I'm telling people?
I did say so.
You'd say so. Do we have people on? Because I know we missed last week, so I don't know if anybody's watching us this week. They're like,
There's a couple.
There's a couple.
Rhonda says hi.
oh, good. It's nice to see you, Ron. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to. Oh, hold on. Where's my.
Anne says hello.
Ann. Okay. So we got a lot of people here. That's good.
John says,
Hey, did you call it back again with Brent? Yep, there it is, because that's me. All right.
John says hi.
John says hi. Okay, yeah, I've got all the comments.
Danny
Hello.
says hello.
Danny says hello.
Yep.
Where's she hiding? Oh, there she is. Good afternoon. Oh, I better. Why does that? I thought I muted that. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Sewing, or what are we calling this? I don't know. Four Pines Quilting live feed from Claremont, New Hampshire. Today, I don't have a lot of news. My parents have been in town. They actually just left this morning. They've been in town for a couple weeks, and so I have been neglectful in my duties as the proprietor of Four Pines. So I don't have a lot of news for you. I didn't even get an email out last week. The only real news we have is we did get a little bit of fabric in, some Christmas stuff. Why didn't you tell me this came in? I forgot I ordered this. This is a great fabric. This is a Christmas fabric. It's called Scaredy Cat, I believe. Who doesn't love a cat Christmas? And the cat is also here on this great tone-on-tone to add a little bit of fun. We don't have like much in the collection because if I remember right, it was kind of like almost a little too bizarre. But all three of these are part of the, like I said, I think it's called Scaredy Cat, isn't it? Yeah, Scaredy Cat Christmas. So we just got three, some nice little Christmas prints. But the big thing that when it came in yesterday, and like I said, my mom happened to be here at the same when this came in, and she's like, oh, I need that. And Brenda saw it, and she's like, oh, I need that. So everybody's been wanting this. And we'll be getting a sample put together for this, but we have, I think, did 12 of these come in? 10 or 12. I think we're down to like 10 because everybody that sees this wants it.
Danny said something about like 10.
So this is a felt panel, and there's a pattern and a sew along to make a bag, to make little people. There's like a whole project involved with this, with your little town of Bethlehem and all your little peeps for Christmas. It's really cute. It's made of felt. It's not cotton, so it's got a texture to it. So when you make them into the paper dolls and stuff, it'll be more interesting. So that all came in, and that's all we got for fabric, I think. Did we have anything come in last week? Because we didn't do a show last week. I think we just had some basics come in. Some of the shadow play, or shadow tones or whatever. Some better text, tone-on-tone basic stuff. Not super, I mean, the colors are nice, but not super duper interesting. I'm not going to pull them off the shelf for you. So that's all we got that came in for there. So that's pretty much all I have for shop news today because just cuz. What we are going to cover today is a little bit of machine maintenance because everybody seems to love sewing machine maintenance. And somebody from South Africa, no joke, I was checking my stuff this morning on my YouTube or on my phone, and there's this message. Somebody in South Africa that says, can you show us how to do maintenance on a Brother F420? Now, I saw that it was a 420, which I thought Eddie will love that, so we should work on the 420 for Eddie. But it's a European model, so I was like, I looked it up, the model. It's going to be a little bit different from this in how it looks, but what I'm going to show you is what I'm going to show you on this machine is pretty standard across a lot of the Brother machines as far as maintenance goes. We've done. You can look in the past on some of our live stuff. We've done luminaires and dream machines a lot, but I don't think we've done much with kind of the more mid-level machines. So this will take care of most of your NQ series, your BQ series, kind of that mid-level. This is actually an NQ 3500D. This is actually sewing and embroidery, but what I'm going to show you is going to apply to sewing machines as well. Just kind of some quick maintenance points, and we're going to talk about that, and we've got some great content for today for me to mumble on about while I'm showing this to you. What are we going to talk about today, Eddie? We're going to talk about history.
Well,
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the process, how I came to this topic. So I was thinking, ooh, South Africa. What can I talk about in South Africa? And then that got me thinking about Dutch colonialism versus English colonialism versus the different flavors of colonialism that you see in Africa, which that's a whole nother thing. And then that got me going, well, then I was thinking, well, wait, then we could talk about how the British ended the slave trade. And I'm like, well, that would be kind of cool too. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about Columbus, because I was in I won't say an argument, but it came up in some Reddit post that I was responded to about how Columbus was evil. And I was like, can you please cite me some resources to explain to me why Columbus is so bad? And then they're like, you should check out Howard Zinn. And now Howard Zinn has been on my reading list for a while, but I find him to be a fascinating thing for history, so we're going to get into that a little bit. Howard Zinn and Christopher Columbus. Do you know anything about Howard Zinn, Eddie?
No.
Have you ever heard the name Howard Zinn?
I don't think so.
Has anybody...
The Zinn chewing tobacco?
No. Has anybody... Let's see. Has any of our... anybody of our audience heard about Howard Zinn? See, I'm more interested in the Howard Zinn than the machine today. Because most people have not. Some people have, especially if they gone to like college and they're like some sort of edgelord in like the 60s or 70s, like, oh, I read Howard Zinn, or even in the 80s. I mean, he's referenced in Good Will Hunting. It's one of those like, oh, I suddenly know all of the real American history because I read Howard Zinn. And this is what's interesting about the whole story of this guy is that his history has never been actually taught in like high school. It's slowly moved its way up into like, you do see it at some college levels, but it's never taught at the high school level. But the history, according to Howard Zinn, is actually pretty well inculcated now in our understanding of American history, and it's just flat out wrong. There's a pretty good argument it's an interesting interpretation, because I'm sure I've got some Howard Zinn fans out there that are going to tell me I'm wrong. But what we're going to talk about today is specifically Columbus, which is an interesting point. But what's interesting about him is a lot of what we understand history at this point has percolated down from this guy's viewpoints, and he was probably, rumor is, and more than likely, he was just like a Soviet agent back in the day. Like he was, back in the days of McCarthyism, the dude that was like, I got a list of all the communists.
I don't know.
Well, he was probably on that list. They're pretty sure he was on that list. Like he's a real, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. Let's get into the maintenance. So, let me pull this back a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. There we go, look at that, yeah. Do we have that on there? Look at that, okay. So this is our machine we're working on. NQ3500D. Now, like I said, any brother machine that you see that has this same kind of plastic shell, what we're about to go through will be pretty spot on for it. And a lot of the other previous models will be similar as well. But we're going to get into some real basic maintenance on this. This isn't going to be super complicated, but it's going to be enough that if you have one of these and you just got to do a little bit of a deeper clean, that we'll get into that. All right. So all we got to do is, first off, I always take off my tray and my top because they're just in the way. And this came in on trade. If you're interested in this machine, we can sell it to you. I can't remember what we have for a price tag. I want to say we've got 3,500. I don't know if I can give prices on the internet on this one. If you're interested, stop in or give me a call. We'll talk about it. We can ship as well. Where did I put? Oh, there's my screwdriver. All right. So, we'll use that to show this edge here. Yeah, so I want to show that camera angle. This angle here, Eddie. That.
Okay, I got it.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, I'll like swap back and forth. So to get started, we just take these two off here. So what do you know about Columbus, Eddie? Christopher Columbus.
He liked manatees.
He liked manatees. Okay. Was Christopher Columbus a good or a bad guy?
I don't know. I don't think he was like an evil guy.
Well, see, that's what's interesting. Because you've heard about people like, we should celebrate Columbus Day, right?
Yeah.
Why should we celebrate Columbus Day?
Why shouldn't we?
Why shouldn't we?
Because he was mean to the Indians.
So all we're doing is we just took these two screws out here because he was mean to the Indians. Yeah, we're gonna get into the Aztecs. That's crazy. Like I could have gone like an hour. I fell down a deep hole on the Aztecs. This is a fun. Anyway, I don't know how far we're gonna get. I'm gonna be all over the map. I hope you all enjoyed the show. So we're just gonna take these two screws out here, and that side just slides right off. The other screw we're gonna take out is come back over to this one. We're gonna take this screw here out, and that is pretty much everything you need to. Now this kind of pops out from the top. You're gonna have to pull it a little bit. It takes a little bit of wiggling and maneuvering. And of course that one's nice and stuck because this machine is probably pretty dirty at this point. Of course I'm doing this with an audience, so it's not coming out as easy as it should. But it usually just pops right out. There we go. And it just kind of pops out and slides out. And then the other thing that we can do, come back over here to this camera. If you want to, you don't necessarily need to do this, but since you're already in here, this is pretty easy to get in here too. Is you see this little nub right there? Sometimes you got to put a screwdriver or something in here. You just have to clear that nub. You just twist that a little bit, clear that nub, pull out from the bottom, and that comes right out. So you can get in there and clean that. And then the other screw you want to take out is this right here. So yes, according to Howard Zinn, Columbus genocided is evil because he killed all the natives. He is the man solely responsible for the genocide of the Aztec people. And
did he purposely do that, or did he like accidentally get him sick? So that's what...
Well, here's the problem. Here's the big issue. A lot of the Howard Zinn history is based on this idea of the victimization, which gets into a whole other political thing. But anyway, so he starts out that Columbus discovered America and killed, and draws a straight line from that to the extermination of the Aztecs. And that didn't happen. In fact, what happens is in the Howard Zinn history, there's a conflation of Columbus and the Spanish conquistadors. Did you know this? And most of the people that are anti-Columbus, when I found this fascinating, because I'm like, why is Columbus so bad? Like the conversation that started all this. I'm like, why is Columbus so bad? And this guy referred me to Howard Zinn. I start doing my research. It's all over the internet. Columbus is this awful, awful human being. You know where they all reference back to? Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. Like everybody that says Columbus is this evil dude, all go back to the same source. And nobody questions it. And I'm not saying the dude was a saint. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is everybody that makes the same claim is going back to the same source material. And if you start to broaden your understanding of the whole thing, it's very fascinating. Because where did Columbus set foot on the North American continent?
Not Plymouth Rock?
Not Plymouth Rock, that's correct. So anyway, we took the screw out of the end here. The screw out of the end there. And now we're going to take this. There's a little screw in here too that we're going to take out. Oh wait. The other thing when you're taking a machine apart is that just pops right out. I'm not going to... Should I take the... I'm not going to bother taking the needle plate off because I didn't grab a screwdriver for that. And then this comes out here. There's a screw in there. And if you've never taken your machine apart like this before, there is... Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you see it on? Can you see it right down there? Do I have to angle it up?
Twist a little bit more.
A little bit more? Right there? Right there? Kind of. Anyway.
And now bring it up.
Now bring it up. There's a little screw right there. Can you see it, Eddie?
Going up.
Keep going up with the machine.
Yeah.
Right
There
there.
you go.
There you go. That screw right there. If you've never taken your machine apart, you have to loosen that screw. I just loosen it half a turn usually, and sometimes I don't even tighten it back up after you take it out. It just holds that in. And then what that's going to do is you should be able to just...
I'm going to better look at
The
other screw.
The other screw? This screw here?
Yeah, we can't really see it.
Oh, we can't really see that?
Yeah, there we go.
So there's a screw in here. I already took it out.
Yeah.
But that's the other screw hole there. So you got the screw on the end and this screw here. This one you just have to loosen. You don't have to take this one out. That one you have to take out. And then once you do that, you just kind of pull down, and that whole thing should just snap right out. There we go. And that just kind of pulls right out. And this is about as far as anybody at home should need to take their machine.
I'd say also take off the needle plate.
Yeah, I didn't bring the screwdriver for that. I don't feel like fighting with it. But yeah, you can take the two screws out here to pull the needle plate out. And what you'll find is most of your dust and gunk is going to be, there's not a lot up here that you have to mess around with because this will generally be pretty clean because of gravity. Gravity pulls stuff down. This is actually very clean. Did you clean this machine already?
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Because this is actually really clean. You're usually going to have lint and a lot of stuff built up down here, and then you just hit this with a vacuum cleaner, and you're good to go. But this is where you're going to see most of your garbage. If you're having feed dog issues, this is your feed assembly. There's a little spot. It's going to be hard to see, but there's a spot back in there that sometimes will get filled with lint. The big things, so this is pretty much all I do. Get it down, hit this with a vacuum cleaner, brush this top down. If you are one of those people that has to put oil on things, because, you want to feel like you're doing something, I don't recommend putting oil on it. But you can put a drop of oil here and here. Now, if you own a Brother Quattro, Quattros are famous for this. You will see this on other embroidery machines as well. Is if you've embroidered for 5 or 6 years and then suddenly you decide you're going to sew and it doesn't sew, but you're embroidering just fine, it doesn't feed properly. What happens on a Quattro is these pivot points here, these are your feed dogs. If you, they'll actually kind of seize up a little bit because they haven't been used in forever. So on a Quattro, all you do is put a couple drops of oil there, take your needle plate off, and just kind of move your feed dogs back and forth and kind of make that pivot point work a little bit to get the oil worked in, and then you're good to go. If it's really, really stuck, you can take it apart and fix it. But if you have a Quattro that for some reason isn't feeding properly, this is sometime. And I've also seen that once on, was it a ULT? I've seen this on another model, but it's more prevalent on Quattros, that this pivot point, if you've been embroidering for a number of years, seizes up. And then hit this with a vacuum cleaner. Like I said, you can put oil here if you'd like to oil. And the other place you can put oil is you can put a drop of oil on the upper part of the shaft right here so that it kind of gets mixed in with that bushing. And if you want to put more oil, like I said, you don't need to put oil on hardly any. Most of this is, self-lubricating. And if you did, you could put another scoop a little bit up here. The other thing, when you have these machines apart, this is also, we've gone way off the history thing because I have a lot to say about this machine.
Yeah.
But, answer your question, Columbus never set foot in North America. Did you know that?
I think so, yeah.
Never. Most of his time was spent on the islands of Hispaniola and Haiti, but never. It's only on his 4th voyage that he landed in what is now Venezuela. But he never set foot on Central America or North America, except for the islands. So anyway, mixing a lot of stuff in here. So up here, like I said, pulling this plastic off really gives you a nice view in here. One of the things that I see happen a lot with a lot of sewing machines, this isn't specific to Brother, is sometimes you'll get thread. Can you see where I'm pointing to up in there, or I need to turn that more? You see this right here? If I turn that, do you see this little bit that moves? Can you see that on the screen, Eddie?
I think so.
Yeah, so this little bit right here, as you turn your needle, this is your kind of a pivot point, and what will happen here is you'll get thread wrapped around this, and over time that thread works in, and this kind of seizes up. Again, whenever I see this happen, people think the machine is, oh my gosh, my machine seizes up, but no, you can actually, this is an easy fix if you bring it into us because we can pop the screw out, clean that up, put a little bit of oil on there, and you're good to go. But if you ever get thread wrapped around that, you can just get it to this point here and pick your thread out. That is what you're going to want to take the top apart if you ever have to do it. The most likely thing you'll have to do is get in here and pull thread that's been wrapped around this shaft and get that cleaned up. The other thing, while we're sitting here looking at this, if you ever have an embroidery machine or a sewing machine that continually tells you that the upper thread break sensor rethreads your machine, but your machine is threaded just fine, that sensor, is that a good view of this?
I think you'll be able to.
Oh, I should look on my camera instead of trying to look at yours.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I can zoom too. Watch this, Eddie. People are going to be amazed. Is that where I want to be? I don't know if that's where I want to be. Yes, that's where I want to be. Can I see it on my screen? Right. Oh, I just made that all awful. What did I do, Eddie?
I switched it off of that for a second.
Okay. Okay, so now we can go back.
All right.
So what you're going to find is right here, there's a little spring. And if you get, and this spring goes up and down as you're sewing. So as your lever here, this lever here goes up and down, it pulls your thread up and down on the spring. And that spring going up and down is what tells your machine if the thread is broken or not. If this spring stops moving, it thinks that your top thread is broken. So if you ever get the, check and rethread your upper thread because the thread break sensor is off, a lot of times what you'll find is you'll pop this out and you'll see some thread wrapped around the spring, so the spring isn't actuating all the way, and that is what will give you that error. And the way you fix that, come in here and you can take the threads off that spring, and that should fix the problem. The other thing that you'd want to look at while you're in here, and like I said, this is as far as I would go. You can take the rest of the screws out and pull the front of the screen off of the machine off if you really wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it. There's not a lot more behind here that you would need to get at home. Your boards and stuff are behind there. It's really not necessary. The only other place that you might want to, do I want to pull it off? It's a pain in the butt to put back on. Is you can take these two screws out, and this panel by the bobbin winder will come off. I'm not going to get into that because it's easy enough to pull out. Getting it to sit back in there is a little bit of a fight.
What would you pull that off for?
The only reason that you would want to pull that off, and this piece here just comes right off without a problem. The only reason you'd want to pull that off is if you got some thread wrapped around the base of this and this wasn't actuating properly. These two screws here and that comes off. Or if you burnt out, there's a little rubber wheel on the bottom of this that runs over here that makes your bobbin winder go. And you can pull this off to get at all that. The other reason you might want to do that is if your bobbin winder doesn't spin freely, put it about halfway over. You can usually spin it by hand. If it's not spinning, if it doesn't spin freely when you do halfway over, then there might need some oil underneath there and you might pop it off. I don't see a lot of problems with these on newer machines. On old barn finds, I guess is how you would describe it. Old machines have been sitting in the attic for a while. This will sometimes be seized up and it won't wind bobbins. But I wouldn't play with that. It's easy to take off. It's a pain in the butt to get it to sit back on there. And we're not going to, and like I said, that's only going to affect your bobbin winder. And if you have run into that, shoot me a message. All right. The other thing to look at in here is this is going to be your tension assembly. If you have a machine with electronic tension, this is your tension assembly. If you don't have electronic tension, this will be a little wheel right here that instead of that motor right there moves this. Instead, it's got a little number and you move it with your finger. But this is this machine has its electronic tension, and so when you turn it, so that motor moves this, and you can see this move back and forth. Biggest issue I run into on these machines. The biggest thing is what'll happen is you will get lint or a piece of thread stuck inside this disc right here, and what that does is then that disc doesn't close all the way when you have it threaded, so now your tension is off on your machine. So that's the biggest thing. This is probably, taking this piece off here is probably the thing you need to do the most on this machine if you ever run into trouble, because you want access to this right here so that you can clean this out. You can do it with all the plastic on, where you just take a piece of stabilizer or thread and you floss it in here, and that will usually clean it up. But sometimes you'll have to actually pop it off, open this up, and pick the lint out. That's going to be the other big thing to look for on these particular machines is lint or thread caught in that tension assembly. And what that will manifest like, if you run into that, you want to go to a different one so they don't have to take and look at my faces. I make faces at them and explain this. How that will manifest if you have lint or string stuck in there is you'll have these giant loops on the back, and you'll think, oh my gosh, my bobbin's messed up because I've got giant loops on the back. Well, what it is you don't have any tension on the top. So because there's no tension on the top, the thread doesn't get pulled back up and it leaves the giant loops on the back. So a lot of times if you have giant loops on the back, you've either got something stuck in that tension assembly or the thread jumped out of your take-off lever. Those are the two biggest things I see happen. Somebody brings a machine in, oh my gosh, my machine's dead, I can't, and so they run into these problems, and then they take their bobbin out and screw the tension up on the bobbin, and the bobbin had nothing to do with it. Because a bobbin doesn't just go lose its tension. So when you see stuff happen like that, it's like, what changed? And if it just is, a lot of times you'll run into the tension issue when you rethread the upper thread. The only thing that I've ever seen where it just randomly just happens and you get these giant loops on the back, it's usually on a Janome. I'm trying to remember the models. They're good machines, but they will jump out of, here, you want to come over here? There's some models of Genomes that the thread will actually jump out of this while you're sewing, and then you get this rat's nest and some loops on the back. Once you know what to look for, it's like, oh, that's exactly what happened. You can see that the thread jumped out, just rethread it, and you're good to go. It doesn't happen a lot. If you have a machine where it's happening a lot, you can actually take a pair of pliers and squeeze the shut a little bit more to make that not be an issue. But that's, oh wait, I do have my screwdriver to take that off. Do we want to take the needle plate off? Is there anything to see under the needle plate?
I don't think really.
Okay, well, there is another thing.
Maybe there is.
Well, we don't need to take it off to show this, but we're going to turn that sideways. Kind of. Okay. The other thing that you may get on one of these machines is if it has a bobbin sensor and it's not telling you that you're out of bobbin, what may be happening is the way the bobbin sensor works, there's a sensor over here that shoots a ray of light across the middle of the bobbin over to here. And you can kind of see it right here. There's a little sensor that sees that light. When it sees that light, it says you're out of bobbin because there's no thread obstructing that view. If you get dust or lint in front of this eye right here, it will never see the light, so your bobbin sensor will never kick off. So if you have a machine that has a bobbin sensor but it doesn't seem to be working, just double check that you don't have lint built up right in this area here. If you take the machine apart, you'll see that if you have a bobbin sensor, you'll see a little eye right here. Just double check that there's no lint or anything built up there, and no lint built up on right opposite over here on the side of the emitter. That's another thing that you'll see a lot on these machines. Okay, do I have any other questions about this?
I don't think.
You don't think?
You got through it.
I think I got through it. Does anybody have any questions? No, I just don't see any questions. So I guess we'll start putting it back together. And shall we continue our story about Columbus, who never set foot on North America, but is yet the man that genocided the Aztecs?
Was Aztec part of North America?
They were more Central America,
Yeah.
Central South America. But anyway, so like I said, if you read Howard Zinn's, like I said, I have to read the whole thing. I've just read excerpts at this point. It's actually on my reading list now because I really got to see what all the hubbub is about. So when I fell down this rabbit hole, what he does is he conflates Christopher Columbus with all the Spanish conquistadors. And now one of the things, when I'm researching this, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just biased. Maybe I want Columbus to be a good guy because, everybody's telling me he's bad. And so, but I ran across a bishop, there's a priest, De las Casas. He's actually one of the first guys to really talk. He's a Spanish bishop in Mexico that really, a lot of what we learn about how bad the Spanish were comes from this guy because he just hated what they were doing to the natives. And it's really interesting, if you read his writings, he's like, yeah, the Spanish were awful and they were just killing people and doing awful things. He said, but Columbus, he was a decent dude. He really tried. And there's a history, because one of the things that Zinn points out that when, I'm just going to put this back together, I guess we can film that while I'm doing that. You want to? In Howard Zinn's history, he talks about how when Columbus was governor of Hispaniola, he was brought back to Spain in chains, Portugal or Spain in chains, because of how badly he mismanaged his governorship. And they're talking about, and it must have been because of how badly he mistreated the natives. But let's think about that for a second, given the history. If the Spanish were really that bad, that what's-his-face says they are, then wouldn't it stand to reason, so you want to clip this on the top here, this slides on, and this piece right here you can see slides on, and then this just clips in. You can see it clips in there. If the Spanish were as bad as they say, right, would they have cared if Columbus is just willy-nilly killing people in his province that he's governor of?
Probably not.
Probably not, because we've established that the Spanish hate the natives and they're genociding them, blah 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 blah. So why would they throw him in chains and bring him back to America, or back to Spain to strip him of his titles and his money? I mean, they were going to throw him in jail.
Because he treated them good.
Well, the alternative, and I was trying to find references for both. The only thing I can find is that they sent an investigation out to get him because the European settlers were complaining against him. They were upset with his mismanagement. And there is a reference that he would side with the native. He would side with the natives sometimes against the European settlers in matters of law if they were mistreating them. So, like I said, I couldn't find any reference for it, but that has been mentioned. And it makes more sense that, if Spain is mad at you for mismanaging, they're mad because you're mistreating the European settlers because they don't really care about how bad you treat the natives because they just want the gold. So this story of, oh, he was so bad that they put him in chains and brought him home probably actually points to the idea that he was sided with the natives more than he should have. So maybe he's not as bad of a guy as we think. And like I said, based on what De Las Casas wrote about him, Spanish people. Spanish names, Eddie. I can't believe people's Spanish names. You'll go over here and I'll show you how this goes back in. So what De Las Casas was writing about him was that he's actually a decent guy, and he approved. He was actually trying to be a decent guy because because Columbus believed that you're better off trying to trade with the natives than trying to kill them because they knew where everything was at. So there's plenty of evidence to point to the idea that Columbus is not the genocidal maniac that they want us to believe he is.
Close the door on the piece that you're putting.
Oh yeah, good point. That'll help. Almost like you've done this before, Eddie. And that just slides right in, and it should snap into place. There we go. But like I said, when I was trying to research this, all of the references cited for how evil Columbus was always went back. Oh, I put the wrong one up top. Always ended up being cited back to Zinn, and I couldn't find any actual historical references otherwise. The actual historical stuff that I could find about Columbus was from aside from his own accounts, was De Las Casas, who did say that he wasn't the worst guy in the world. He was actually just an explorer. He wasn't all about genociding people. But let's talk about the genocide of the Aztecs. What do you know about the Aztecs? The conquistadors came and they wiped them out. That's the story we're told. And the evil white man, the evil Europeans came and ruined this peaceful, idyllic society that had been over here, that was innocent from, the natural man. If you really want to get into, oh gosh, what's the dude's name? The French guy. The wackadoo French guy. That has all this stuff about the natural man that makes no sense when you really start getting into it. Did I have the right one? I think it was the right one. Rousseau, but we won't get into that. That's a whole nother story. But you can see. Well, I guess they're the same. I thought they were different. There's only two small screws on here, and that's these two that are facing front. So what we've got is Hernando Cortez is credited with the destruction of the Aztec Empire, and so he's like making his way through the jungle. And like I said, what happens is they often conflate Columbus with the conquistadors, and that's why he's blamed for all the genocide, which is not true at all. The conquistadors are separate from Columbus. Those are two very separate and distinct ways of dealing with native people. Why does that not want to go in? Because I'm sitting here trying to talk and screw at the same time. And that did not come out well. And you probably caught that on. So what happened with the Aztecs, and this is what I found fascinating, is what were the Aztecs famous for, Eddie?
They got cool temples.
Yeah, they do have cool temples. Do you know what they did with those temples?
They killed people.
Yeah, they killed people on top of the temples. They were like, hey, let's kill people. Where did they get the people to kill on the temples?
War prisoners?
Yeah, for war. But the other thing, too, is that the Aztecs were kind of like the kingdom at the time, and they had like what they call vassal states. So imagine, we'll use like Puerto Rico would be like a vassal state to the United States. They're kind of their own thing, but we still kind of support them and, pay taxes and whatnot. And where they would get their, so when the Aztecs would tax the other tribes, one of the taxes would be that they had to provide human sacrifice. Just imagine like pay your income tax and, oh, by the way, give us one of your kids. That's kind of how the Aztecs were operating, right?
Yeah.
So, as Cortez is marching towards the Aztec capital, he's learning all this stuff, and of course we can go back over to the other camera because I think I'm done with most of that there. Marching towards the capital, the Aztec ruler at the time is sending him all these diplomatic envoys, trying to kind of woo him to make sure that he's, they're trying to make sure that he's not going to cause trouble. But at the same time, he's meeting all of these other tribes that are, being oppressed by the Aztecs. I mean, despite what Howard Zinn teaches, Because one of the other things that Zinn is famous for, one of his main premises is that the Europeans brought slavery to America. That it wasn't here; it was ideally before he got here. No, these tribes that you can just look at me instead of the machine right now because I'm having all sorts of issues. Is that the Aztecs were taking slaves and human sacrifices from these, the people that they beat and subjugated. And so as Cortez is marching towards the Aztec capital, he's meeting all these tribes, and they're like, hey, guess what? We'd be happy to ally with you. We want to be your friends against the Aztecs. And so after hearing all of and it doesn't help that the interpreter that the conquistadors had was actually a member of one of these tribes. So I don't know how much that also kind of framed how they felt about all of it.
Yeah.
But there we go. All I was doing there is when I put that on underneath here, you could feel that it wasn't lined up right. I was just lining that back up proper. So they're marching against the Aztecs, and they a bunch of these other native tribes are like, hey, these dudes are probably our way out. So it's kind of like the Aztecs versus the world. It's not just the conquistadors they got to worry about as they're marching on them. And they finally get there, and then war breaks out, and then but it was actually the smallpox that pretty much decimated the Aztecs. And then the genocide happens after the fact. So the conquistadors pretty much take over because they've got guns and all that stuff. All that happens. And then, but the smallpox, they say, is probably the biggest thing that took out a lot of the empire. And then we hear about the Aztec genocide, that the conquistadors just killed all the Aztecs. The truth of it is it wasn't the conquistadors. It was the allied tribes, because they're kind of like, yeah, guess who's king now? And they decided to exact revenge upon the Aztecs for what they had done by exacting human sacrifices and taking the kids and all that stuff, to the point that I had to find the reference. I saw it referenced once, but I couldn't find original source on it. But there is a reference to the fact that the conquistadors had to post patrols and security details to keep the allied tribes from the wholesale slaughter of the Aztecs. That's what was happening. That the Spanish were stepping in and saying, dude, got enough. You killed enough of them. Let's bury the hatchet by God. But they actually had to have they had security posted in the cities to keep their allied tribes from the continued wholesale slaughter of the Aztecs after the conquistadors had won. So that's a whole different kind of story than the idea that Columbus sailed to America and he went and wiped out the Aztecs, because Columbus probably never even saw the Aztecs. And then there's talk of the Haitian tribes is where they say that he genocided. But there again, Columbus was spending most of his time sailing back and forth. He was not part. Some stuff may have been done in his name because of who he left in charge, but he wasn't responsible for a lot of it. He was actually sailing. So that is, like I said, there's a very interesting whole history of Columbus. But this is why what I found interesting about this is hardly anybody's ever heard of Howard Zinn. But this narrative that we have of how evil Columbus is, and he might be not a good guy. I'm not saying he's a perfect guy. There's probably more stuff out there, because I'm no real historian. I just talk about things on the internet. But what's interesting about Zinn, because he doesn't stop with Columbus, he takes everything right up to the current, I think up to Vietnam, actually, with his book of American history. But that story of Columbus is so mainstream now that this guy you've never heard of, this Howard Zinn, has actually formed that. That's kind of the genesis for a lot of this, but nobody's ever heard of it. Well, I don't say nobody's ever heard of him, but a lot of people don't realize. I mean, you were never taught about that. You were never taught about Zinn in high school history, but some of the ideas that are in his book, because your high school history teacher probably read him, filters through. And that's what a lot of people misunderstand about what's going on in society today when they're like, oh, it's just taught on college campuses. And we won't say what are different ideas, but these ideas may not be being taught to our children in schools directly, but they're filtered in through the process of education. And like I said, the story of Columbus is fascinating like that. And I imagine that most of the people most of the people that are watching this are probably too old to really have been influenced by this dramatic change in the retelling of American history. But the current story of American history is heavily influenced by this book from Howard Zinn, and it's all kind of made up. I don't want to say made up. It's told from a very distinct point of view, and when you understand the history of the dude, you can understand. You can see what he was doing, and that's
Gene's here.
okay. And I just thought, like I said, I've got all sorts of. So what else do I? Oh, this is the other thing I found. Okay, so you've heard about people trying to cancel Columbus Day, right? Because it's got to be Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like the whole. That's what kind of sent me down this rabbit hole, right? Okay, check this out. Do you know who first tried to cancel Columbus?
No.
Just who is the opposite? What's like the polar opposite of somebody that says we need to cancel Columbus for Indigenous people? What would be like the exact? What group can you think of that would be the exact opposite of that?
I don't know.
What famous Southern American?
The
The KKK. The KKK were the first ones to attempt to cancel Columbus. Did you know this?
I did not. Why did they do that?
And this is another rabbit hole that you fell on because the stuff we're told these days, and then you start to look at the history stuff. It's amazing. So the KKK were all about. They tried to cancel Columbus back in the 20s because he was Italian. Yes, the KKK hates. I don't know if they still. Yeah, they must still hate. I mean, I don't know if they've updated their dogma, but the KKK tried to cancel Columbus because he was Italian, because you can't have no Italians. The racial superiority of the United States. We don't want them Italians to be part of it. So that you think about that. I thought that was hysterical when I found this out because you read it today and like the people trying to cancel Columbus are they stand on the exact opposite end of that spectrum of the KKK, but they're trying to do the same thing. And then you start to extrapolate that out to a bunch of other ideas that are kind of held on some of these extreme sides. And you look at the extreme left and the extreme right, are like doing the same thing. It's bizarre. They have completely different reasons, but they're trying to do the same thing. And when I found out that the KKK wanted to cancel Columbus because he was Italian, that just made my day. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so that's basically the native tribes, vassal states, human sacrifice, that, yeah. So anyway, if you want to do some homework, read A People's History of the United States. That's on my reading list. I've read a lot of excerpts while preparing for this. And like I said, it's fascinating because once you realize what's involved in it, you might start to question a lot of stuff. Like I said, question everything. Look for original sources. That's one thing that I like. Internet sleuthing is fun. And what's really cool about internet too is Google has a huge, the Google Docs, not Docs, but there was a project that Google was doing for a while that they were scanning like reference stuff from libraries. So there's a lot of original source material from like the 1800s, 1900s from libraries that are scanned in online. And if you're doing some of this, find the original documents because you'd be surprised how much we think we know. And you start to read the real story and you're kind of like, that's not how it was told to me. But anyway, and like I said, that's what was interesting about my deep dive into Columbus was the fact that everything points back to the same source material, which is questionable at best. Anyhow, did I forget anything?
I think you're also.
I mean, we got into some maintenance. We got into historical maintenance, like the maintenance of history,
Yeah.
But that, like I said, I'm trying to remember who contacted me from South Africa that wanted to see how to do maintenance on an F420. What we just did is going to be very, like I said, that's going to cover a lot of brother machines. It's pretty basic. You can get in there, like I said, dust it, oil a couple spots, and away you go. Any questions?
John said the Italians fought back with the mafia and took over New Orleans and Miami.
Yeah.
When was that?
That's got a lot to do with that. The mafia has a lot to do with a lot of the anti-Italian sentiments that you had in the United States. They got together and kind of got organized.
So they were cool.
They were cool. They were cool because they made movies. You see, but think about that for a second, okay? So they were cool because we got all these really cool movies about how cool the mafia was.
We need like a Goodfellas for Christopher Columbus.
No, but what if there's was a Goodfellas for like the KKK? If there was a more charitable interpretation of the Ku Klux Klan in American media, how would we feel about them? Would it change that they're bad. That the driving ideology, because there is a narrative that they were just kind of standing up for the Southern way of life. And I once talked to a person from the South that really was explaining to me that I've been sold the bill of goods and the KKK really isn't bad. Very convincing case, but I can't get past when you start doing a deep dive and you see the people involved. You're like, yeah, I'm not buying it. And so I wonder, like, with the mafia, kind of similar, right? I mean, those dudes are like killers but yet we glorified them in American media, so now they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. Scorsese's just really good at making movies.
Yeah. Is Scorsese Italian?
I think so. He might be.
So if he was like
honorary, at least.
Honorary, okay. Ray Liotta, yeah. Anyway, so like I said, question all the stories and find original sources, and then question the propaganda. I mean, we got minutes, okay. Yellow journalism. You learned about that in high school, right?
A little bit.
Yeah. What is yellow journalism?
It's journalism to make people think a certain way.
Yeah, like propaganda. Yeah. Like we had the Spanish American War is all because of yellow journalism, right?
Yeah.
When did yellow journalism end?
I don't know.
We talk about it because yellow journalism because of the Spanish American War, and then it never comes up again. Did it ever go away?
Frank Sinatra made it cool.
Yep. That's what the KKK was missing. If Elvis had put on the hood, maybe they would be cool. We're gonna get in trouble for this. But think about that for a second. Yellow journalism never really went away. We just stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go on. There's also you could fall down the internet conspiracy theory, but think about that too. The news you watch, what are they trying to tell you? But yes, I do not espouse any of the beliefs by any white supremacists. Actually, you know what? A really good movie to watch. I'm just gonna put this out there. Oh gosh, what was it called? It's the lady that she's from Denmark. White right among the enemy. I'd have to look it up. It's a fantastic look at it. It's actually a really cool movie. It's about this lady of, I think she's Pakistani, and she goes out and she starts to interview like white supremacists. And she goes and like she's at Charlottesville and she goes out and she talks to like the head. And before it's over, a lot of the people that she talks to actually end up getting out of like the Ku Klux Klan because they're like, you're the kind of person I'm supposed to hate, but now that you're my friend, I can't espouse those beliefs anymore. And it's a really cool movie about about the power of being a nice person and being a friend and getting to know somebody rather than just assuming that because of the swastika on their arm that they're a jerk. Because she would do that. She would go up to these people that like had like the neo-Nazi stuff, and she would talk to them and become their friends and really have some hard conversations with them. And it was very interesting. By the end of the movie, there was half the people she talked to had denounced their membership and had gotten away from it because they couldn't abide by those principles anymore because they had discovered that humans are cool. Like all humans, not just the ones that look like me. Remember that. All humans are cool, not just the ones that look like you. Anyway, should that be the nice message? What's that?
You should put that on a shirt.
What, humans are cool? Even if they don't look like me?
Yeah.
No, maybe we should do sentient beings are cool, even if they don't look like me. That way, if the aliens come, they'll know we're friends.
Do you think they'll read it? Do you think they know how to read?
I don't know. That's a good question. Would they know how to read? Because if they're already here with their UFOs and stuff, they've studied this, they must have a couple of our first grade reading books, like Dick and Jane. So then they'll be like, oh, see Spot Run? Anyway. Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. We were off the topic. But anyway, like I said, I did cover the maintenance. If there's anything else you guys want to see, shoot a message or give us a holler, and we'll be happy. I'll be happy to do what we can for you. Thanks for watching. What's that?
Gene wants aliens next week. So.
We could probably talk about aliens. We did talk about Betty and Barney Hill a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got a couple, right? What about all the UFOs right now? Like everybody's saying, like UFOs are a thing now. Like I think it's a smoke show. I think, yeah, because I don't believe anything the government tells me anyway. So now they're going to tell me that UFOs are real, and suddenly I'm supposed to believe that because I want to believe. Can't do it.
Maybe they're reverse psychology.
I don't know. It's quite possible. Because okay, here's the thing: if you are a higher life form or smarter civilization, you like fly by Earth once, take a look what's going on, and be like, why would I stop there? And you just keep going. You know what I'm talking about, right? You go like on a road trip and you think you think of towns you could stop in, and you're like, I'm not stopping there. There's nothing there. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. Like if you're a higher life form, that's got to be what Earth is. It's like wow. Anyway, I'm completely off. Thanks for watching. Join us again next week for whatever we're doing here. So on, and be excellent to each other.